Hello there, you're watching Talking Europe on France 24. We are at the European Parliament in Strasbourg, but our minds are down on the farm, a place that perhaps conjures up picture book images for many of you watching, although many farms in Europe today are actually vast industrialised affairs. They're also a place where the biggest chunk of the EU's budget ends up, nearly 40%, thanks to the Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, which funds subsidies for farmers. Well, right now, the CAP is less gentle pasture and more battleground. The European Commission proposing new strategies to make farming more sustainable as part of its Green New Deal. All the while, though, budget cuts are looming large. And what's more, a recent investigation by the New York Times raised serious questions about where the CAP money is ending up. The paper providing evidence that corrupt government officials in several member states are or have been misusing farm subsidies to enrich their friends, families, even themselves. Our question today, has the EU's farm policy gone down the wrong tracks? How should it be reworked in the future? Our guests today are the Vice President of the Parliament's Agriculture and Rural Development Committee, a Portuguese MEP, Francisco Guerreiro. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And you're with the People, Animals, Nature Party in Portugal, which is part of the Greens group.
Exactly.
Now, next to you we have CARMEN AVRAM, an MEP from Romania's Social Democratic Party. Hello there.
Hello there.
Hi. And across from you we have KATALIN, Hungarian MEP. You founded the centrist Momentum Movement Party, and you're also Vice President, one of the Vice Presidents of the centrist Renew group.
Yes.
So there we are. Those are our guests for today. Let's jump straight into this enormous subject. The CAP, it's for many people a jewel in the EU's crown. It's one of its flagship policies. It's helped to feed a continent after the Second World War, through economic crisis. But at the same time, there are a lot of criticisms on many different scores. I'd just like to ask each of you, do you believe that the CAP is a good policy today?
Well, the CAP can be a force of good, and we have to make sure in the current phase of legislation that it is something that can help us to achieve our ambitious climate goals, help us to get nutritious food to Europeans' table, but also to prevent misuse of these funds. Because right now, I'm afraid we don't have enough controls in our system. And I'm very sad to see Europeans' money going wasted sometimes and also funneling oligarchs and mafia states.
Francisco Guerreiro.
No, it was a very important fund and a program in Europe, but nowadays it's merely focused on super intensive production. So, for give you an example, we waste 1/3 of our food in Europe. So the problem is not the quantity of the food, is the quality and the distribution. And also we can see that this is a huge fund, so it's around 28 in the pluriannual financial framework. Nowadays it's 28%. So we are talking about 365 billion euros in a period of 7 years, so it's a lot of money. And it's not channeled, it's not being channeled in our perspective to small farmers, agriculture that is based on the sustainable use of land, of water. It has to increase also the welfare of animals in production, and as it is currently, it will not be able. We will not be able to make the transition to a decarbonized society, because the cap as it is the same as the old cap. So, and we don't see efforts from the other groups to reshape the cap structurally. So we are very concerned with this policy.
You're looking for big change there, Carmen AVRAM.
If the CAP wouldn't have been a good policy, France wouldn't have become the biggest export on cereals from Europe. And then we have to look at the differences between the countries. We cannot just blame some countries because they have big farmers, huge farmers, because Europe had paid the farmers for so many decades in order for them to grow, to develop, to feed whole Europe, to export, to bring money to their countries. And now we blame them for, on the one hand. On the other hand, we have differences among the countries, because not all the countries got into the CAP 5 decades ago. We have countries that got into a CAP 12 years ago, like Romania, for instance, and other East European countries. So they didn't have a chance to grow. So, but in the same time, they are showing signs of development. it's going to be very good for these countries if the current system is going to stay in place. Now we are going to change it. What do we see? We see the biggest change in the history of the European Union regarding CAP, and then we see the biggest uncertainty in the CAP, which is bringing a lot of desperation, and it's not a too big word, to the farmers of the European Union.
Francisco Guerreiro, you're shaking your head.
No, I totally disagree. We are in a climate crisis. The biodiversity scientists are saying that we are near collapse in society, and the CAP is a way that we are promoting this kind of destruction. And we don't feel a structural change, even though I recognize, and it's true, that we have difference between countries, but the policy making and the policy channeling of funds is directed to dangerous and harmful ways of practicing agriculture. That's a clear fact.
So is it possible to maintain the CAP and protect, support farmers? What we hear from CARMEN AVRAM about farmers being attacked, we do hear it from...
Yes, and let's be clear, we are not against big farmers. The thing is that the model that they promote is not the best to tackle climate change and to divide equally the money that is
we don't
being
have
channeled for funds.
alternatives right now.
Of course we have alternatives,
no,
and the Greens are talking about it for more than 20 years, and now we are going back to that discussion. What is the type of production that we want to have and the type of food that we want to have? We have more food than we can eat. We have 1/3 of the food being wasted in Europe,
We
and
can
this is a
export the
fact.
food. So we can export our food to countries who do not have the food.
And we still waste 1/3 of the food. So it's not a food problem. And even the model of exporting food has to be questioned, because the footprint of that exportation is not internalized. That's the big issue.
Well, I wanted to talk as well about the issue of exactly where this money is going to, not just what kind of farming, organic, very intensive, but also this issue of corruption, which has been raised in that big investigation by the New York Times. It's been a bit of an earthquake here in the European Union. Just to recap for our viewers, the New York Times reporters, for example, in Hungary, made a lot of accusations. They did their own analysis of government land records and found that Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister, under his rule, land has been sold off to his allies and even family members, people who, of course, received the resulting land subsidies, because most of the CAP money is attributed according to just the basic size of your land. So I put these claims to the Hungarian Foreign Minister, Péter Szijjártó. I wanted to play that out for you today because we don't have, unfortunately, a representative of Viktor Orban's party available for our debate today. So these are claims that were put forward by former Hungarian State Secretary for Rural Affairs, József Ányán, and I asked if Hungary would be prepared to undergo an investigation into these matters. Take a listen.
You can be sure that we are a traditionally agricultural country, and we use the EU funds coming from the common agricultural policy properly. We are ready for any kind of investigation. We are ready for any kind of procedures run by the European Commission.
So you disprove the claims?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
New York Times went into government land records, for example, to look at who's buying land.
This is a personal, emotional issue. I know Mr. Ányán very well. He used to serve as a state secretary. It was painful for him that he cannot do it further on. So, I mean, I don't know why. We know why. I mean, I know why he does it, but to be honest, I don't understand.
You're saying that it's a personal motive?
Yeah.
Well, we have KATALIN with us, who founded the Momentum movement, and one of your big issues is issues of corruption in your home country of Hungary. How do you feel hearing that denial of there being any issue?
Well, first of all, I would like to point out that dragging the whistleblower is a typical mechanism of somebody who is in the wrong side of the story. That's quite ridiculous that he's pointing out on Mr. Ányán instead of refuting his claims. However, let us just analyze what he said. He said that he did everything according to the rules. But maybe this is the very exact reason why we have to rethink the way how we distribute money. And if we also have to consider, if we take well enough care of European taxpayers' money, we have a populism crisis all over the continent. We have Brexit. We have this very atmosphere where people just question whether the EU distributes European taxpayers' money in the right way. And I think we do not. We do not have strong enough controls. We do not have a strong enough framework. And now it is the time to change this. And also, let me just point out that I find it completely ridiculous that Hungary, that is being challenged by corruption allegations all the time, still has the power to opt out of the European Public Prosecutor's Office jurisdiction. It should be compulsory for a state like Hungary, where European taxpayer money is not being used in the right way.
Well, the European Commission has said that it has zero tolerance for fraud and that several investigations are ongoing. As you say, there are questions about jurisdiction. I'd like to come back, though, to this issue about how the subsidies are handed out. The major proportion, as I said, of the funds from the CAP are just distributed based on how big your farm is. It doesn't matter what you're growing, what you're doing there, it's how big your land is. And CARMEN, AVRAM, in your country, Romania, there have been documented land grabs. Small farmers, individuals who found that their land has just been sold off behind their back somehow.
Well, yeah, I'm a shadow in many reports, and I'm trying to take my contribution to amendments. So one of the contribution I put in was to define a little bit the way the farmers are going to be perceived. So you need to make a difference between land grabbing and land concentration. In Romania, we have land grabbing, but not that much. What we do have, in fact, we have land concentration. What is a land concentration? Farmers needed to buy and to have some land in order to become more credible to the banks and to take credit from their banks. Because in Romania, I don't know if you know, we have the most expensive money in the European Union. So farmers need to pay huge interest rates. So now, in order to become credible, they needed to have land, more land, as a guarantee to the bank. So it's not exactly land grabbing all over the place. We do have some foreign companies who came at the beginning of the 90s and the beginning of 2000 who grabbed some land, but in mostly
But is it the fact that the fact that the money is handed out based on the size of the land encourages these kind of practices, and in fact it makes it harder for farmers who have small plots of land who can't borrow money easily?
No,
makes it harder for them to just live their lives?
No, it's not the same thing. We have a completely different situation in Romania. Most of the farmers do not own their land, they loan it. So they loan it from small farmers who do not have the means to take credit from the bank.
But the question is, shouldn't the European Union be looking at what the situation is in the individual member states and adapting the policy to the situation rather than trying to change how people...
There was a meeting yesterday with Commissioner Wojciechowski, and he was saying exactly this. We have different realities inside the European Union. So we need to tackle these differences, because we have differences in the time since we have been members of the European Union and the way the agriculture is being done in these countries.
I feel like KATALIN wants to jump in.
Yeah, let me just say that let's not forget that in this House, a few months ago, we voted on a very ambitious Green Deal program that was labeled like Europe's man on the moon moment. So I think it's like our absolute obligation to make sure that every legislation we make from this point on will be compatible with the Green Deal. And with such a big amount of money going into the common agricultural policy, we have to make sure that it is fit to deliver on our climate targets.
But we also said nobody will going to be left behind.
They will.
So talking about the transition, we'll carry on.
No, and they will, because 80% of the CAP money is now to the 20 top recipients percent. And obviously, we cannot look at this if we don't have a structural change. If we continue to base our model, and this is crucial and structural, if you continue to base our model in quantities and hectares, we will fail to make the transition to decarbonized society. For us, that is clear. And regarding the corruption, this is not only in Hungary, so we should not pinpoint just on this.
Absolutely, it's just one example.
It's one of several examples, and it's a way for us to understand that the EU should have mechanisms to check if the money is being channeled through proper use and to the proper usage. And let us be clear that the governments also have a big responsibility on this, and so the national legislation should be adapted so it could be transparent and we could make a traceability of the money and the channeling that is being made through the agriculture use. And that's not being made in several of these countries. That's why they say they can reply to these questions, because the law, the national law, is made to be
well, everyone's
not
nodding.
transparent.
I think we found something that you all agree on.
Yeah.
But the question is then, the European Commission was asked about this point, about investigating corruption cases. Currently, the EU's corruption investigators can investigate, and then they hand the dossier over to the national authorities. This happened in the Czech Republic. Prime Minister Babiš investigated. The case was dropped by national prosecutors, picked up again. But is there a gap? Well, there clearly is a gap here in the competency. But this comes back to one of the big arguments in the European Union. How far should the European Union, Brussels, go in deciding what happens in a member state?
Well, I think it's an absolute necessity to look where the money is going to and ask for guarantees. I mean, if I give you 100 euros, I think it's just right for me to ask that what you are going to spend it for. And if I loan it to you, I need a guarantee that you will give it back to me.
So we're talking about building in guarantees before giving the money, or more oversight, more checks
More
afterwards?
oversight, certainly. And because European taxpayers need to know that their money goes to the right place. And if not, it's a problem. And the gap, what you are talking about, is, in my opinion, the European Public Prosecutor's Office, a very new agency that is being set up just now in order to fight crime, in order to fight fraud. So this is our rule as lawmakers, to give them the means and the money and the personnel to do so, and also to extend their scope to cover every area where European money goes.
Okay, unfortunately we've run out of time, but I feel like there are some big questions that are going to be looked at in the coming months, as you say, as that prosecutor's office gets going, as the CAP is rewritten. I'd like to thank you all very much for your contributions to this debate. Carmen Avram, Francisco Guerreiro, and also KATALIN.
Thank you.
Thanks to you as well for watching our debate here on Talking Europe. Hope to see you soon for more European news.
The world is ever changing. The news doesn't wait. That's why at France 24, we'll always be there to help make sense of world events. For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what, France 24 is with you everywhere, all the time.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.